The city air was thick and humid, sticking to the skin like a second layer of clothing that nobody wanted. It was one of those afternoons where the sun hid behind a haze of gray clouds, threatening rain, but never quite delivering, leaving the streets of the downtown area feeling heavy and suffocating. Lily adjusted the strap of her guitar case for the 10th time in as many minutes. It was heavy, weighing down her shoulder, but the weight felt familiar. It felt like gravity, keeping her grounded in a world that often felt like it was spinning too fast. She stood on the corner of 5th and Grand, looking up at the towering glass structure in front of her. The building was a masterpiece of modern architecture, all sharp angles and reflective blue glass that seemed to mock the cloudy sky. This was Apex Artists, the most prestigious talent agency in the city. They represented the stars, the people you saw on TV, the voices you heard on the radio, the names that lit up in bright neon letters on billboards. And today, for some reason, Lily still couldn't quite understand they had agreed to listen to her. Lily looked down at her feet. It was a nervous habit she'd developed over the years, a way to check her reality when things felt too big to be true. On her feet were a pair of brown loafers. They weren't the stylish kind that celebrities wore. They were old, the leather worn soft and pale on the inside from years of use. The toes were scuffed, showing the dark grain of the leather underneath the polish she had tried to apply earlier that morning. On the side of the left shoe, there was a tiny, almost invisible split where the leather had started to separate from the sole. They were comfortable shoes. They were shoes that had walked her through college classes, through late-night shifts at a diner, and through long hours of practice in dusty garages. But looking at them now, standing in the shadow of this gleaming monument to success, they felt terribly out of place. She took a deep breath, swallowing the lump of anxiety that had formed in her throat. "It doesn't matter," she whispered to herself, though her voice sounded small against the noise of the traffic. "They aren't listening to your shoes. They are listening to your music." It was the mantra she had repeated all morning. It was the only thing keeping her legs moving as she stepped through the rotating glass doors and into the lobby. The change in atmosphere was instant. The chaotic noise of the city honking horns, shouting pedestrians, the rumble of buses disappeared, replaced by a silence so thick it felt like physical pressure. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of expensive coffee and lemon polish. The floor was white marble, so shiny that Lily hesitated to step on it, afraid her scuffed loafers might leave a mark or, worse, a squeak that would echo through the vast hall. The lobby was huge. To her left, a reception desk stretched out like a runway, occupied by a woman with perfect hair and a headset who looked busy doing nothing. To her right, a seating area with chairs that looked more like art pieces than furniture. Everything here screamed money. It wasn't just rich. It was the kind of wealth that didn't need to shout. It was quiet, confident, and intimidating. Lily walked toward the reception desk, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She felt incredibly self-conscious. Her jeans were clean but faded, hugging her legs a little too loosely after months of stress seating too little. Her white shirt was crisp, thanks to her roommate's iron, but it was a simple brand from a discount store. As she got closer to the desk, she saw her reflection in the dark glass behind the receptionist. She looked small. She looked like a speck of dust that had accidentally floated into a pristine room. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked. She didn't look up from her computer screen. Her voice was polite, but had that distinct, robotic edge of someone who has said the same words 1,000 times today. Yes," Lily started, her voice cracking slightly. She cleared her throat and tried again, projecting a confidence she didn't feel. "I'm Lily. I have an appointment with Mr. Henderson at 2 p.m. for a music audition." The receptionist's fingers paused over the keyboard. She looked up, her eyes scanning Lily from the top of her messy ponytail down to the hem of her jeans, and finally, inevitably, to her feet. The gaze lingered there for a fraction of a second longer than necessary, a flicker of something that looked like judgment, or perhaps just confusion. "Lily," the woman repeated, turning back to her screen. "Ah, yes." The open call slot. She typed something in and tapped a button on a printer. "Take this to the elevator on the right. Go to the 15th floor. The waiting room is the first door on your left." Lily took the paper pass. It was heavy cardstock, embossed with the Apex logo. "Thank you," she said softly. "Don't be late," the receptionist added, already looking back at her screen. Lily turned and walked toward the elevator. She pressed the up button and waited, watching the numbers above the doors light up and dim. When the elevator arrived, the doors slid open silently to reveal an empty, mirrored carriage. She stepped in and pressed the button for the 15th floor. As the doors closed, she caught her reflection again. She looked at her guitar case. It was covered in stickers from local coffee shops and bands that no longer existed. It looked like a road map of her life. It looked lived in. "You belong here," she whispered to her reflection. "Your songs are good. They are real." The elevator ride was smooth and fast, making her stomach lurch slightly as it ascended. When the doors opened, the 15th floor looked just as intimidating as the lobby. The carpet was thick and gray, absorbing all sound. The walls were lined with framed gold and platinum records. Lily walked slowly, reading the names on the records as she passed. These were legends. People who had changed the world with their music. And she was just a girl from the suburbs with worn-out shoes. She found the waiting room and stepped inside. It was a long, narrow space with a row of chairs along one wall and a large, abstract painting on the other. There were 3 other people already waiting. On the far left, a young man sat with a notebook on his lap, tapping a pencil rhythmically against his knee. He wore a leather jacket that looked brand new and expensive boots that matched his outfit perfectly. In the middle, 2 women were chatting quietly. They were dressed impeccably, in outfits that looked like they had been pulled straight from a fashion magazine. One of them had a guitar case too, but it was sleek and black, without a single scratch or sticker. Lily stood in the doorway for a moment. Feeling the urge to turn around and run back to the elevator, she felt like an intruder. She felt like she had walked into a party where she didn't know the host and wasn't invited. The tapping of the pencil stopped. The chatting women paused and looked up at her. Lily forced a polite, tight smile and walked to an empty chair at the far end of the row away from them. She sat down, placing her guitar case gently between her legs, hugging it close to her chest. It was her shield. She pulled her feet back under the chair, tucking her scuffed loafers out of sight. It was a childish reflex, like hiding a bad report card. She knew it was silly. She knew that music was supposed to be about talent, about soul, about connection. But sitting in this room, surrounded by people who looked like they stepped out of a catalog, she felt the heavy weight of reality. The music industry was a business, and businesses liked products that looked good on the shelf. The girl with the sleek guitar case went back to her conversation, lowering her voice slightly. Lily tried not to listen, but the quiet room made it impossible not to overhear. "I've been preparing for this for months," the girl whispered. "My vocal coach says my range is perfect for what they are looking for this season. And I just got these boots specifically for the meeting. You know how they are about image?" "I know," her friend replied. "My dad hired a stylist for me. He said I need to look the part before they even hear a note. It's all about the package, right?" Lily looked down at her guitar case. Her dad hadn't hired a stylist. Her dad was a mechanic who had worked double shifts to help her buy her first guitar. Her vocal coach was a retired singer from the local church choir, who taught her for free in exchange for Lily helping with the food pantry. Her package was just her. It was the songs she wrote in her bedroom when she couldn't sleep, the melodies that came to her while she was riding the bus, the feelings she poured into the chords because she didn't know how to say them out loud. She rested her chin on top of the guitar case. The nervousness was turning into a quiet resolve. She thought about why she wrote music. She didn't write it to look cool. She didn't write it to wear nice boots. She wrote it because it was the only way she knew how to make sense of the world. She wrote it for the tired waitress at the diner, for the lonely kid walking home from school, the people who felt like they didn't fit in. She wrote music that was real. Minutes ticked by. The man with the pencil was called in. He stood up, adjusted his jacket, and walked through the heavy oak door at the end of the room with an air of confidence. 10 minutes later, he came back out. He wasn't smiling. He grabbed his bag, gave the room a quick nod, and left. He didn't say a word. Then it was the girl with the sleek guitar case. She stood up, checked her reflection in the glass of the fire alarm, and walked into the office with a bright, practiced smile. She was in there for 20 minutes. When she came out, she was still smiling, but it looked a little brittle. The office behind the heavy oak door was nothing like the waiting room. The waiting room was a museum. This was a throne room. The walls were painted a deep, dark blue. The kind of color that made you feel like you were underwater in the middle of the night. One entire wall was made of glass, looking out over the sprawling city below. From this height, the cars looked like toys and the people like ants. It was a view that belonged to someone who owned the world, or at least a very large piece of it. Lily stood just inside the doorway, her hand still on the brass handle. The air in here was different too. It was cooler, conditioned to a perfect temperature, and it smelled of expensive mahogany, old paper, and the faint, sharp scent of peppermint. Behind a massive desk that seemed to take up half the room sat the man she had come to see, Mr. Vance. He didn't look up immediately. He was sitting in a high-backed leather chair, facing the window, his back to the door. He was talking on the phone, his voice low and smooth like velvet being dragged over sandpaper. Lily stood frozen, not sure if she should sit, stand, or walk back out and close the door. Her heart was beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. A rhythmic thump-thump that drowned out the traffic far below. She looked around the room while she waited. There were shelves lining the walls, packed not with books, but with trophies, framed magazine covers, and gold records. Each one had a story, a success story. Seeing them made the lump in her throat grow bigger. These were the people Mr. Vance had helped. These were the winners. And she was just a girl with scuffed shoes and a dream she hadn't quite figured out how to sell. Yes, cancel the lunch, Mr. Vance was saying into the phone, sounding bored. I don't care what they say. If the numbers aren't right, I'm not interested. Image is everything. If the package doesn't shine, the product doesn't matter. You know the rules. He laughed, a short, dry sound that wasn't really a laugh at all. He hung up the phone without saying goodbye and finally swiveled his chair around. He was younger than Lily expected, maybe in his late 30s, with perfectly styled dark hair that didn't move a single inch. His suit was tailored to fit him perfectly, the charcoal fabric stretching over his shoulders, crisp and sharp. His tie was a deep red, a splash of color that demanded attention. He looked at Lily, but his eyes didn't light up. They didn't show curiosity. They just scanned her, quickly and efficiently, like a cashier scanning a barcode at a grocery store. He looked at her face, her hair, her shirt, her jeans, and then his eyes stopped moving. They were fixed on her feet. Lily instinctively curled her toes inside her loafers. She wished the floor would just open up and swallow her whole. She forced a smile, trying to break the ice. Mr. Vance. Hi, I'm Lily. From the lobby. We have an appointment for... Come in, he said. His voice was polite, but it was cold. It was the kind of polite you use when you were talking to a telemarketer. He didn't stand up. He didn't offer to shake her hand, just watched her. Lily took a few steps forward, her shoes squeaking very slightly on the polished hardwood floor. The sound seemed incredibly loud in the silent room. She stopped at the edge of his desk. It felt like a canyon between them. So, Mr. Vance said, leaning back and steepling his fingers together. He tapped his fingertips against his chin. You're the walk-in. The one the receptionist told me about? Yes, sir. I've been writing for a few years, and I really admire your roster. I think my sound is something that could fit well here. I brought my guitar. She patted the case, as if reassuring herself it was still there. Mr. Vance didn't look at the guitar. He was still looking at her feet. A small smirk played on the corner of his mouth. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile someone makes when they see a bug crawling across their expensive rug. Tell me, Lily, he said, drawing her name out slowly, as if he was tasting it and didn't like the flavor. Do you always dress like this for auditions? Lily felt her face get hot. The blush started at her neck and rushed up to her cheeks. She clasped her hands together in front of her. I wanted to be comfortable, she said, her voice sounding weaker than she wanted it to. I wanted to focus on the music. Comfortable, he repeated. He let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a loud laugh, but it echoed in the room. It was a dismissive sound, the kind of laugh that cuts through confidence like a knife through warm butter. You know, I've been in this business for 20 years. I've seen thousands of kids come through this door. They all have talent. Everyone has a voice. Everyone can play a chord. But do you know what separates the people on those walls from the people playing in subway stations? He didn't wait for her to answer. He pointed a manicured finger at her. The package, the image. People don't just buy music, Lily. They buy a dream. They buy a lifestyle. When I look at you, what dream am I supposed to see? The dream of struggling to pay rent? The dream of shopping at the thrift store? Lily felt a sting behind her eyes, a warning that tears were threatening to form. She blinked them away angrily. She didn't want to cry here, not in front of him. My shoes don't play the music, Mr. Vance, she said, her voice gaining a little bit of steel. My songs are real. They are about real life, real struggles. People connect with that. Mr. Vance shook his head slowly, looking disappointed. Real life, he scoffed. People watch TV to escape real life. They want glamour. They want perfection. They don't want to look at someone who looks like they just walked off a farm. Leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk, closing the distance. Look at those shoes, Lily. They are falling apart. How can I trust you to handle $1 million career when you can't even handle a pair of leather soles? Lily looked down at her loafers. She saw the worn leather, but he didn't see what she saw. He didn't see the miles she had walked to get here. He didn't see the late nights at the diner where her feet ached so bad she could barely stand. But she kept going because the tips in her jar meant she could buy a new set of strings. He didn't see the comfort they gave her when she felt alone. They are good shoes, she whispered, more to herself than to him. They are a liability, he snapped back. This industry is cutthroat. Shh. If you walk into a meeting with a record label, looking like a mess, they will laugh you out of the room before you even unzip that case. I'm doing you a favor by telling you this. Go home, buy a suit, polish your shoes. Or better yet, buy new ones. Maybe come back when you look like you care about yourself as much as you care about your songs. He picked up a pen from his desk and clicked it rhythmically. Click, 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 it was a signal. The meeting was over. Lily stood there for a moment, stunned. She had prepared for this moment for weeks. She had practiced her answers. She had picked her best songs. She had visualized this conversation going so differently. In her mind, he was going to be a tough listener, but a fair one. He was going to hear the music and be moved. But he hadn't even asked to hear a single note. Is that it? She asked, her voice trembling. You aren't going to listen? Mr. Vance sighed a long, heavy exhale that showed just how tired he was of this conversation. He checked his watch. I have a very important lunch meeting in 20 minutes with a client who understands the brand. I don't have time for charity auditions. The receptionist will give you a parking voucher. I don't have a car, Lily said quietly. I took the bus. Mr. Vance paused. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. For a split second, something flickered in his eyes. Maybe it was a memory of when he was young and hungry. Maybe it was just pity. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. The cold, hard mask slid back into place. Then take the bus, he said, turning back to his computer screen. Go home, Lily. Don't waste your time chasing something you clearly don't understand. Lily stood there for another 10 seconds, waiting for him to change his mind. Waiting for the movie moment where the grumpy boss suddenly hears her humming and realizes she's a star. But this wasn't a movie. This was real life. And in real life, people like Mr. Vance didn't look past the surface. She tightened her grip on the handle of her guitar case. Her fingers were white with pressure. She wanted to scream at him. She wanted to tell him that his perfect artists were just products and that she was an artist. She wanted to throw her shoe at him and show him how durable it really was. But she didn't do any of those things. She just stood there, feeling small and invisible, while the man behind the desk typed an email, already forgetting she was in the room. Fine, she said, barely loud enough to hear. I'll go. Mr. Vance didn't answer. He just kept typing. Lily turned around slowly. Her movements felt stiff, like she was moving through water. She walked toward the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. The squeak of her loafers seemed to mock her now, echoing Mr. Vance's laugh. Asterisk squeak. You're not good enough. Squeak. Go home. Squeak. Asterisk. She reached out for the door handle. Her hand was shaking so badly she almost missed it. She gripped the cool metal and turned it. As the heavy door swung open, she heard Mr. Vance's voice behind her, low and mumbled. And next time he called out, not even looking up from his screen, wear heels? At least try to look like a girl. Lily froze. Her hand clenched the doorframe until her knuckles turned white. A hot flash of anger rushed through her, so powerful it made her gasp. She wanted to turn ARO. The revolving doors spun behind her, pushing her out of the cool, mint-scented tower and back into the heavy, humid air of the afternoon. The city noise rushed at her all at once, horns blaring, sirens wailing in the distance. The dull roar of 1,000 conversations happening at once. It was chaotic and messy, but compared to the suffocating silence of Mr. Vance's office, it felt like a warm embrace. Lily stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, letting the breath she had been holding finally escape her lungs. Her shoulders slumped forward, the weight of the guitar case suddenly feeling 10 times heavier. The humiliation was still there, sitting in her chest like a cold stone. She replayed the scene in her head over and over, the sneer, the laughter, the dismissal. It played on a loop like a bad song she couldn't turn off. She looked down at her feet again. The brown loafers were still there, scuffed and battered, looking up at her. Mr. Vance saw liabilities. She saw survival. But right now, survival felt lonely. She reached into her pocket to check her phone. She had 3 messages. One from her mom asking how it went, one from her roommate wishing her luck, and one from her bank reminding her that her account balance was dangerously low. She didn't have money for a taxi ride home. She barely had enough money for the subway ticket. Okay, she whispered to the empty street. Back to reality. She walked the 3 blocks to the subway station, dragging her feet. The station was dimly lit, illuminated by flickering fluorescent tubes that buzzed with a low, headache-inducing hum. The air down here was thick, smelling of ozone, damp concrete, and the faint metallic temps of the tracks. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't the gleaming glass of the Apex building, but it was real. This was where the city actually lived. The workers, the students, the dreamers who were tired but still moving. Lily swiped her Metro card, heard the beep, and walked through the turnstile. She was heading to the platform to catch the train back to her small apartment on the outskirts of the city. But something stopped her. She paused near the tiled wall of the corridor. The acoustics here were strange but wonderful. If you stood in just the right spot, the sound would bounce off the curved ceiling and travel all the way down the hall. She looked at her guitar case. It was covered in stickers and scratches. It looked exactly like what it was, a tool of the trade for someone who hadn't made it. Yet, Mr. Vance's voice echoed in her head. Asterisk, go home. Asterisk, I am home, she said softly to the empty tunnel. A sudden surge of defiance rose up in her chest. It was hot and sharp, pushing against the sadness. Who was he to tell her she wasn't enough? Who was he to say that her shoes, her life, her struggles made her music worthless? He sat in a tower judging people. But down here, people just wanted to feel something. They didn't care about the package. They cared about the connection. Lily didn't unzip her case to perform for an audience. She didn't do it to make money. She did it because she felt like she was going to explode if she didn't let the music out. She needed to play. She needed to wash the feeling of Mr. Vance's cold stare off, her skin with something warm and alive. She placed the case on the ground and opened it. The guitar inside was her oldest friend, a beat-up acoustic model with a chipped paint job. She pulled it out and slung the strap over her shoulder. The tunnel was mostly empty, save for a few people rushing to catch their trains, their eyes glued to their phones. They were walking past her, barely seeing the girl in the faded jeans and scuffed shoes. Lily closed her eyes. She took a deep breath of the stale subway air and let her fingers find the strings. She didn't play a cover song. She didn't play something popular on the radio. She played the song she had written the night her dad lost his job. Song about holding on when everything feels like it's falling apart. The first chord rang out, sharp and clear. It cut through the buzzing of the lights and the distant rumble of trains. It was a raw, gritty sound that belonged in a tunnel. It's not a recording studio. Then she began to sing. Her voice wasn't perfect. It wasn't auto-tuned or polished. It had a crack in it, a tremor that betrayed her own pain. But it was powerful. It echoed off the tiles, filling the long corridor with a haunting melody. The lyrics were simple. Just words about walking miles in worn-out shoes and finding beauty in the broken places. Asterisk, they tell you to shine. They tell you to glow. Asterisk, asterisk, but they don't know the places you've been. Asterisk, asterisk, they don't know the weight of the snow. Asterisk, asterisk, or how you keep the warmth within. Asterisk at first, nobody stopped. A businessman in a gray coat hurried past, his briefcase bumping against his leg. A teenager with headphones looked up, startled, then kept walking. Lily didn't care. She wasn't playing for them. She was playing for the girl she used to be, the girl who felt invisible. She poured her heart into every note, letting the anger and the frustration flow through her fingers and out into the strings. But slowly, the atmosphere in the tunnel began to change. A young woman pushing a stroller paused. She had been looking tired, her shoulders hunched against the stress of the day, but she stopped. She turned her head toward the music. She didn't look at Lily's clothes or her shoes. She just listened. Then, an older man with a weathered hat stopped. He leaned against the tiled wall, closing his eyes, letting the melody wash over him. He looked like he carried a heavy load of his own, and for a moment the music seemed to lighten it. People began to gather. It wasn't a huge crowd, just 5 or 6 people at first, then 10. They stood at a respectful distance, forming a semicircle around Lily. It was quiet. The usual city noise seemed to fade away, muted by the spell of the song. Lily opened her eyes and saw them. For a second, panic flickered in her chest. She remembered Mr. Vance scanning her, judging her. She almost stopped. She almost apologized for taking up space. But then she saw the look on the young woman's face. She wasn't judging. She was smiling, a soft, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. The older man had taken off his hat and was holding it over his heart. They weren't seeing a poor girl in scuffed shoes. They were seeing themselves. They were seeing their own struggles and their own resilience reflected in her voice. Lily kept playing. She played louder, stronger. The defiance she felt earlier turned into joy. The joy of being heard. The joy of being real. She stomped her foot on the concrete floor to keep the rhythm. The rubber sole of her loafer hitting the ground with a satisfying thud. Mr. Vance had laughed at her shoes. But right now, those shoes were keeping the beat for a song that was stopping a subway train at the edge of the crowd. A teenage boy stood listening. He had a heavy backpack slung over one shoulder and a skateboard tucked under his arm. He was supposed to be meeting friends, but he couldn't move. He watched the way Lily closed her eyes when she hit the high notes, the way she seemed to be somewhere else entirely. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. It wasn't to mock her. It was because he knew, instinctively, that something special was happening. He wanted to capture it. He wanted to remember that magic existed in dirty subway tunnels. He hit record. The camera focused on Lily, but he made sure to get the audio just right. He didn't zoom in on her shoes. He zoomed in on her face, on the passion that radiated from her like heat. Lily finished the chorus and transitioned into the bridge. Her voice rose, soaring up toward the arched ceiling. The sound was incredible. It bounced around the tunnel, creating a natural reverb that no machine could replicate. It sounded like a choir, even though it was just one girl, as the song wound down. The last note hanging in the air like a held breath, the tunnel was completely silent. No one spoke. No one moved. They just stood there, letting the feeling sink in. Lily lowered her guitar. Her fingers were trembling slightly, not from fear now, but from the adrenaline. She looked at the people standing in front of her. For a second, she was terrified they would just walk away, that she had imagined the connection. Then the older man stepped forward. He didn't say a word. He just reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill. He placed it gently into the open guitar case. "Thank you," he gruffly said. That was beautiful. The young woman followed, placing a few bills next to his. You have an amazing gift, she said softly. Don't ever let anyone tell you different. No. Lily felt a lump form in her throat, but it was a different kind of lump than before. It wasn't the heavy stone of rejection. It was the warm, full feeling of acceptance. Thank you, she whispered. More people came forward, dropping in dollar bills and coins. Some nodded, some smiled, some just walked away with a lighter step than when they arrived. The skateboard kid hit the stop button on his phone. He looked at the video on his screen, watching it back. The title of the song was written on a piece of cardboard tucked into Lily's case. Asterisk songs for the broken. Asterisk, he typed out a caption quickly, his thumbs flying over the screen. Asterisk found this girl in the subway. She has more soul in her little finger than any pop star on the radio. Listen to the end. He tagged it with a few simple hashtags. Hashtag real music, hashtag subway artist, hashtag hidden gem. With a tap of his finger, he uploaded it to the internet, then picked up his skateboard and skated away. Carrying the song with him, Lily packed up her guitar. She looked at the money in the case. It wasn't $1 million. It wasn't a record deal. But it was more than Mr. Vance had given her. It was respect. She slung the case back over her shoulder. Her loafers were still scuffed. The internet is a strange and vast place, a giant ocean that never stops moving. Usually, it is full of noise, arguments, advertisements, and funny pictures of cats. But sometimes, usually late at night, when the world is quiet, something real happens. Something cuts through the noise like a sharp knife through butter. The video of Lily in the subway station didn't explode immediately. When the teenager with the skateboard uploaded it, it was just one drop of water in a million others. He posted it with a simple caption, tagging a few friends, and a couple of music pages he followed. He then put his phone in his pocket and went to bed, thinking maybe 100 people would see it. He had no idea he had just lit a match in a dark room full of fireworks. While the city slept, the video began to travel. It started small. A few people scrolling through their feeds paused when they saw the thumbnail. It wasn't flashy. There were no bright lights or special effects, just a girl with messy hair and a guitar standing on dirty concrete. But the audio made them stop. The algorithm, the invisible computer brain that runs the internet, noticed that people weren't just scrolling past. They were stopping. They were watching the whole 3 minutes. They were rewatching it. By the time the sun began to rise over the skyline, painting the clouds in shades of pink and orange. The video had been shared 5,000 times. In a small apartment on the other side of the city, a nurse was getting ready for a long shift at the hospital. She was tired, her eyes burning from lack of sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed with a cup of coffee, scrolling through her phone to wake up. The video popped up. She saw the girl in the scuffed shoes, saw the way she closed her eyes when she sang. The nurse listened to the words about walking miles and holding on. She felt a sudden lump in her throat. It was exactly how she felt. She didn't know this girl, but she felt like the song was written just for her. She pressed the share button with a trembling finger, typing, "This is exactly what I needed to hear today." In a high school classroom miles away, a student sitting in the back row was hiding his phone behind his textbook. He was having a terrible week. He felt invisible, like nobody at school saw him or understood him. He watched the video, the sound turned down low, one earbud in. He watched Lily's face, the raw honesty in her expression. For the first time all week, he didn't feel alone. He liked the video. He shared it to his story. By mid-morning, the snowball was turning into an avalanche. The view counter was spinning so fast the numbers were a blur. 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. The comments section was filling up faster than anyone could read them. It wasn't just people saying nice voice. It was people pouring their hearts out. Asterisk, I cried watching this. This is real music. Asterisk, asterisk, who is she? She needs a record deal immediately. Asterisk, asterisk, look at her shoes. I love that she doesn't care. She's just singing. Asterisk, asterisk, I usually skip videos, but I watched this 3 times. Her voice is magic. Asterisk, the irony of the situation was thick and heavy. Just a few hours ago, in a glass office high above the city, a powerful man had told Lily that her shoes were a liability. He had told her that her image was wrong, that nobody wanted to see real life. He had said that people wanted glamour and perfection. But now, as the internet devoured the video, it was proving him wrong in the most spectacular way possible. People weren't watching the video. Despite her scuffed shoes and faded jeans, they were watching it because of them. In a world of filters and Photoshop, where everyone on social media looked like a magazine cover, Lily stood out like a beacon of truth. She didn't look perfect. She looked like a human being. She looked like someone who struggled. She looked like them. And that connection was more powerful than any marketing budget Mr. Vance could have ever bought, while the world fell in love with the subway girl. The mood at Apex Artists was tense, up on the 15th floor. The office was buzzing with a different kind of energy. The assistants were running around, looking stressed, holding tablets and phones like they were explosive devices. The air smelled of expensive coffee and panic. In his corner office, Mr. Vance was enjoying his morning ritual. He was sipping an espresso, looking out at the city, feeling like the king of the world. He had forgotten all about the girl with the loafers. To him, she was just a minor inconvenience, a wasted 20 minutes of his day. He was already focused on his next meeting. A pop star who sold millions of records, but couldn't carry a tune without a computer. There was a tentative knock on his door. "Enter," Mr. Vance said, not turning around from the window, his junior assistant. A young man named David, who usually wore terrified expressions, stepped inside. He was holding a tablet, his knuckles white from gripping it so hard. "Mr. Vance?" "Sir?" David's voice was squeaky. "I think you need to see something. It's trending." Mr. Vance sighed, turning slowly. He hated the word trending. It usually meant something silly that he didn't care about. "David, I am very busy. If it's a dancing cat or a baby eating a lemon, I don't have time for it." "It's not a cat, sir," David said. He walked to the desk and placed the tablet down. "It's a video. It's all over the place. Every blog, every music site. It's #1 on the viral chart right now." Mr. Vance frowned. He picked up the tablet, looking at it suspiciously. "What is it, just?" "Press play, sir." Mr. Vance tapped the screen. The video started. At first he didn't recognize the setting. It was a tiled tunnel, dark and gritty. Then the camera focused, and he saw the girl. He saw the messy ponytail. He saw the faded jeans. And then the camera panned down slightly, and he saw the shoes. Mr. Vance froze. The audio started. That voice. The clear, haunting, powerful voice that he had refused to listen to just hours ago. He watched her mouth move, singing the words she had written. He watched the small crowd gathering. He watched the raw emotion on her face. He watched for a full minute, his face getting redder and redder. The view counter in the corner of the screen caught his eye. 1.2 million views. He slammed the tablet down onto the desk with a loud bang. "That girl," he hissed, the words coming out through gritted teeth. "The girl from this morning?" David swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. That's her. The internet is going crazy for her. People love the authenticity." Authenticity? Mr. Vance practically spit the word out. He stood up and began to pace behind his desk, his expensive shoes squeaking on the floor, the kind of squeak that sounded professional, unlike Lily's. "She looks like a mess. She's in a subway station. Who listens to music in a tunnel?" "Apparently everyone, sir," David said quietly, tapping the screen to show the comments. "Look at the comments. They are praising her look. They are saying she's grounded and real. Some of the biggest music blogs are calling her the voice of the generation." Mr. Vance stared at the screen. He read the comments. Asterisk. "This is what music is supposed to be." Asterisk. "Finally, someone who isn't fake." Asterisk. He felt a strange sensation in his chest. It was a mix of anger and something else, something uncomfortable. Fear. He had built his entire career on the idea that he knew what people wanted. He sold perfection. He sold gloss. He sold the dream. But this girl, this nobody he had kicked out of his office, was proving him wrong. She was succeeding without his help, without his package, without his permission, and she was doing it by being exactly who he told her not to be. "This is ridiculous," Mr. Vance snapped, straightening his tie. "It's a fluke. It's the novelty of it. She's a circus act. In a week, people will get bored and go back to real artists." "Actually, sir," David said, looking at his phone, 3 major record labels have already tweeted at her, asking for contact info. And there's a campaign starting. Hashtag Find the Subway Girl is trending right above hashtag New Music Friday.
Ow.
Mr. Vance stopped pacing. He looked at the door where Lily had walked out just a few hours ago. He remembered the look in her eyes when he made fun of her shoes. He had thought she looked defeated. He thought he had crushed her, but looking at the video now, seeing the fire in her eyes as she sang, he realized he hadn't crushed her. He had just made her angry. He had fueled the fire. He sat back down in his leather chair, the silence of the office suddenly feeling very heavy. He looked at his gold records on the wall. They felt dusty. They felt old. The world was moving on without him, changing right under his nose. And he had missed the biggest thing of the year because he was looking at a pair of worn-out loafers. "Get me her file," Mr. Vance ordered, his voice low. "If she even has one." "She doesn't, sir. She was a walk-in. We don't have anything. Find her," Mr. Vance shouted, losing his cool for the first time in years. "Use the internet. Track her down. I need to fix this. Before someone else signs her and I look like a fool." But even as he said the words, he knew it might be too late. The genie was out of the bottle. The song was free. It belonged to the people now, not to the executives in glass towers. Meanwhile, across the city, Lily was waking up. She didn't know about the millions of views. She didn't know about the record labels fighting over her. She didn't know that Mr. Vance was panicking in his tower. She just rolled over in her bed, sunlight streaming through her dusty blinds. She yawned and reached for her phone, expecting to see a text from her mom, asking if she wanted to come over for dinner instead. She saw hundreds of notifications. Her screen was a blur of red bubbles. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. Her phone was vibrati. The days that followed the viral video were a blur of chaos and noise for Lily. Her small, quiet life had been completely turned upside down. Her phone, which used to mostly be for grocery lists and texting her mom, was now ringing constantly. It felt like the whole world suddenly wanted a piece of the girl with the scuffed shoes. But amidst all the noise, Lily stayed calm. She had been offered a gig at the City Hall Charity Gala. It was the biggest event of the year. A fancy black-tie dinner, where the richest and most powerful people in the city gathered to donate money and pat themselves on the back. Normally, a girl like Lily would never be invited to such a thing, let alone asked to perform. But the organizers knew that having the viral subway sensation would bring attention to their cause. They wanted the spectacle. They wanted the girl the internet was obsessed with. The night of the gala arrived. The venue was a massive ballroom, with ceilings so high they disappeared into shadows. Crystal chandeliers hung from the roof, casting sparkling light over the crowd below. Every table was covered in white silk cloth and decorated with expensive flower arrangements. The air smelled of rich food, expensive perfume, and champagne. Lily stood backstage, peeking through the heavy velvet curtains. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a drum solo. Out there in that sea of round tables sat hundreds of people in tuxedos and sparkling gowns. The men wore shiny black shoes that probably cost more than Lily's entire wardrobe. The women wore heels that looked like dangerous weapons, delicate and sharp. Lily looked down at her own feet. She had gone back and forth about what to wear. Part of her thought about buying a nice pair of heels just to fit in, just to show Mr. Vance she could clean up. But the more she thought about it, the more it felt wrong. Those people in the subway hadn't fallen in love with a fake version of her. They loved the real her. They loved the struggle and the honesty. So she made a choice. She was wearing a simple long black dress she found at a thrift store and altered herself. It was elegant but simple. And on her feet, she was wearing the same brown loafers. She had cleaned them up as best as she could, polishing the leather and tying the laces tight, but the scuffs were still there. The split in the sole was still visible. They were her shoes, and she was going to stand in them on that expensive stage. 5 minutes, Miss Lily, a stagehand whispered, touching her elbow lightly. Lily nodded. She picked up her guitar case. It felt heavy, but it was a good weight. It was her anchor out in the audience. The atmosphere was stiff. People were drinking wine and speaking in low voices about stocks, real estate, and vacations. Mr. Vance was there. He was sitting at a table near the front, looking impeccable in his tuxedo. He had come to see what the fuss was about. He wanted to see if the girl he had rejected was actually a star, or if the internet was just crazy. He still didn't think she belonged. He looked at the empty stage and sipped his drink, convinced he was about to watch a train wreck. He was ready to lean over to his date and say, "I told you so," as soon as she made a mistake. Suddenly, the lights in the ballroom dimmed. The chatter quieted down. A spotlight cut through the darkness, hitting the center of the stage. The heavy curtains parted. Lily walked out. The first thing the light hit was her guitar. The second thing it hit was her shoes. A ripple went through the crowd. People whispered. Mr. Vance narrowed his eyes. He couldn't believe it. She was wearing those shoes. To a gala, it was disrespectful. It was absurd. He shook his head slowly, a smirk tugging at his lips. She had just proven his point she had no class. But then, Lily started to play. She didn't use a microphone stand. She sat on a simple bar stool they had provided, adjusted the height, and strummed the first chord. The sound system was excellent, carrying every note clearly to the back of the room. It was the same song she played in the subway, the one about the cold snow and the warmth within. Her voice floated out, clear and strong, instantly silencing the whispers in a room full of fake conversations and forced smiles. Her voice was like a bucket of ice water. It was real. It was raw. The people in the front row stopped eating. The people in the back stopped checking their phones. They all looked up at the girl in the thrift store dress and the worn-out shoes. Mr. Vance froze. The smirk vanished from his face. He was listening. Really listening. In his office, with the air conditioning and the desk between them, he hadn't actually heard the music. He had only seen the package. But now, stripped of all the noise, there was nowhere to hide. The talent was undeniable. The emotion in her voice made the hair on his arms stand up. He felt a strange tightening in his chest. A feeling he hadn't felt in years, the feeling of being moved by music. She sang about struggle. She sang about walking miles when you were tired. She sang about finding dignity in the dirt. As she reached the chorus, her voice swelled, filling the massive ballroom. She wasn't looking at the crowd of wealthy donors. She wasn't looking at the crystal chandeliers. She had her eyes closed, lost in the song. She was back in the tunnel. She was singing for the nurse, the tired student, and everyone who had ever felt invisible. When she hit the final note, she held it. The sound echoed off the walls, beautiful and haunting. Then she let the guitar fade out into silence. She opened her eyes. The ballroom was dead silent. For 10 seconds. Nobody moved. Nobody clapped. It was a heavy, electric silence. It was the silence of hundreds of people realizing they had just witnessed something special. It was the silence of people realizing that everything they valued, money, suits, polished shoes, meant absolutely nothing in the face of true art. Then a single person stood up. It was an older woman in the back row. She clapped slowly, respectfully. Then another person stood up. Then another. Suddenly, the room erupted. It wasn't just polite applause. It was a roar. People jumped to their feet, clapping their hands raw. The sound was deafening, bouncing off the high ceilings. Lily sat on her stool, blinking in the bright light. She was shocked. She saw a man in a tuxedo wiping a tear from his eye. She saw women clutching their pearls, looking amazed. She saw the skateboard kid who had filmed her. He had snuck in somehow and was cheering the loudest from the back. And then she saw Mr. Vance. He was sitting, while everyone else was standing. His hands were resting on the table, but he wasn't clapping. He was staring at her. His face was pale, his mouth slightly open. He looked like a man who had just watched his house burn down, somehow couldn't look away. Lily looked him right in the eye. She didn't glare. She didn't look angry. She just looked at him with a quiet, steady gaze. She didn't need to say anything. The music had said it all. The song had been her answer to his laugh. It had been her proof that value comes from the inside, not from a price tag. She stood up and bowed. The applause got even louder. Lily walked off the stage, her heart racing harder than it ever had in the subway. Backstage, people rushed to congratulate her. Organizers were shaking her hand, telling her she was amazing, talking about contracts and future tours. They wanted to manage her. They wanted to own a piece of the magic she had created, but Lily just smiled politely and nodded. She tuned out the noise about money and fame. She carefully put her guitar back into its battered case. She zipped it up, patted the side lovingly, and slung the strap over her shoulder. She walked out the side door of the venue, stepping out into the cool night air. The city was quiet now, the traffic lighter than before. The streetlights cast long shadows on the sidewalk. A black limousine was waiting at the curb, the driver standing by the back door, ready to take her to an after-party or a fancy hotel. But Lily walked right past it. She ignored the driver's confused wave. She didn't need the limo. She didn't need the fancy hotel. She didn't need Mr. Vance's approval anymore. She started walking down the street. Her loafers hit the pavement with a steady, comfortable rhythm. Scuff, tap, scuff, tap. The sound was music to her ears. They were the same shoes she had worn when she was invisible. They were the same shoes she had worn when she was laughed at. And they were the same shoes she was wearing now that she was a star. She looked up at the skyline. The lights of the city twinkled above her, looking like stars that had fallen from the sky. It was a beautiful sight, but it wasn't the view from Mr. Vance's office. It was better. It was a view from the ground, from the sidewalk, from the real world. Lily took a deep breath of the night air. It smelled like rain and exhaust fumes and pizza from a street vendor down the block. It was the smell of life. She pulled her phone out of her pocket and saw a text from her mom. Asterisk, we watched you. I'm so proud of my girl. Asterisk, a smile spread across Lily's face, a wide, genuine smile that reached her eyes. She typed back a quick reply. Asterisk, coming home for dinner. I'm bringing pizza. Asterisk, she put the phone away and kept walking. She had a long walk to the subway station, but she didn't mind. She wasn't running away anymore. She was walking toward her future one scuff at a time. And for the first time in her life, the rhythm of her footsteps felt perfect.